Welcome back. You're still tuned to ET Now, and India's top banks and card networks are rethinking their ties with Dreamfolks, the country's dominant airport lounge aggregator. After a major service disruption in September last year that affected lounge access for thousands of flyers, ICICI Bank and Axis Bank and MasterCard are now exploring direct partnerships with lounge operators and cutting out the middlemen. Dreamfolks, which claims 90% market share in the domestic lounge access space, faced backlash when 49 lounges across 34 airports suddenly shut in September last year. Adani Airports even accused the company of violating service contracts. In fact, sources say more banks may follow ICICI Bank and Axis Bank in shifting away, with some like Amex already tapping Adani Digital.
All right, now moving on, it's a Mega Times network exclusive. Now, speaking on speculations around what went wrong, Air India chairperson asserts that the aircraft AI-171 had a clean history. And that engine was timely, serviced as well, it was new. Now, he also points out that both the pilots in that Air India plane were exceptional professionals. Let's take a look at that conversation.
Particular aircraft, AA-171, that particular tail, has a clean history.
Has a clean
history. And the two engines, both engines, the right engine was a new engine put in March 2025. The left engine was last serviced in 2023 and due next maintenance check in 2025 December. And both the engine histories are clean. When I saw that, I couldn't find anything with the team. Both the pilots are exceptional pilots. And the captain, Sabarwal, has more than 11,500 hours of flying experience. And the first officer, Clive, has more than 3,400 hours of flying experience. What I hear from our colleagues is they were excellent pilots and great professionals.
That's a network exclusive for you, but about 2 decades ago, flying was a luxury and now it's a way of life for India's growing middle class. From just 45 million air travelers in 2009 to over 375 million air travelers in 2024, the skies are busier than ever. But it's not just about more planes. India has to build runways to match the demand. Nivedana explains how the country's aviation boom is grounded in infrastructure and how it's taking India to newer heights.
16 years ago, flying felt like a luxury, but the democratization of our skies is a story of India on the rise. An 8-fold jump from 45 million flyers in financial year 2009 to more than 375 million in financial year 2024. The flying class is now the middle class, and they're flying frequently. But a sharp rise in passengers needed more than aircraft. It needed runways, and that's where India doubled down. New airports have taken flight to places like Darbhanga, Kalaburgi, Holongi and Shivamoga, connecting smaller towns to metros. In 2016, Udan scheme was launched, an acronym for Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. Its goal, make flying affordable. Today, smaller towns like Hubballi, Kurnool and Jarsguda are on the air map, linked by sub-hour flights that were unthinkable a decade ago. While India's skies expanded, the fierce competition also led to eventual consolidation. In just a few years, legacy names like Jet Airways and Go First folded, but new challengers entered with aggressive playbooks. The story is yet to be written. Indigo and Air India now command more than 90% of the share. But India's aviation ambitions aren't stopping at regional flights. The next phase is global, with both Air India and Indigo, two giants with very different DNAs, placing record-shattering fleet orders. The Indian aviation industry has seen many ups and downs since 2009. Its story corresponds with India's economic mobility. There was a time when Jet Airways soared as the full-service favorite. Kingfisher dazzled with glamour and style. Air India, with its Maharaja legacy, still held sway over the nation's imagination. And Indigo, just a young budget airline in the wings, barely flying 14% of India's passengers. But aviation, like ambition, doesn't stay still. As death soared, some giants fell, others merged, new players rose, and Indigo just kept climbing. It built a flee faster than anyone imagined, dominated metro routes, bet very big on regional connectivity. Now, the Indian sky hasn't just changed, it has been redrawn. Indigo now carries the lion's share of domestic flyers, not just leading, but flying in a different orbit. Even after its mergers, the Tata-backed Air India group doesn't cross 30%, and the rest, they're holding on to single digits. From bankrupt legacies to billion-dollar turnarounds, from runaway clutter to one airline rewriting the rulebook, 16 years have changed the face of Indian aviation, and millions more are ready to join the journey.
Well, that was the aviation sector in the past 16 years. But the world has changed a lot in the last 16 years. On the 16th anniversary of ET Now, we track changes in world leaders from 2009 to the years after that. It was a time when the world leaders were globalists, unlike today. Who could have anticipated back then that MAGA would be a major political movement and global village would be a term much despised.
"16 years ago, the world was led by globalists. Today, it's run by strongmen. From Trump 2.0 to Modi 3.0, from Putin's battlefield to Xi's boardroom, leadership has become personal, polarizing, and profoundly strategic. From the corridors of the White House to the alleys of Davos, from Raisina Hill to Red Square, the faces at the top did not just change, they challenged the world order. This is the era of power transitions and a world that keeps asking who leads next. From hope to hardliners. In the last 16 years, leadership has shifted like tectonic plates. 16 years of partnerships, pivot points, and power moves. 2009 to 2014 power map. From Obama's diplomacy to Angela Merkel's steadiness, from Xi's ambition to Putin's pause, things were changing. Enter the disruptors. 2014, Narendra Modi storms in. 2017, Trump shakes the system. Politics wasn't polished anymore. It was punchy. It was personal. Across continents, voters chose bold over balanced. Modi, Trump, Duterte, Bolsonaro, Erdogan saw a rise of nationalism, digital propaganda, leader branding. From Macron's climate pledges to Netanyahu's Middle East flashpoints, the world's political architecture was slowly being redrawn. In fact, a new leadership style was born. Hard on headlines, heavy on impact. The world in crisis mode. From bailouts to border wars, protests to pandemics, every year since 2009 has pushed the world closer to a reset. Financial collapse, rising strongmen, a virus that froze the planet, and wars that reshaped alliances. The disruptors were tested. Impact behind the handshakes. While each move was decoded, global decisions were made in several corners of the world map. Each visit became more than optics. It was market moving, policy making, spotlight shifting. And through it all, India became the constant, transforming summits into stagecraft, handshakes into headlines, and India into a voice that negotiates, not just participates. Leadership is no longer just about governance. Who defines tomorrow? Leadership is now about narrative control, digital diplomacy, and supply chain politics. Trump is back, louder, and maybe strategic. Modi's term 3, less campaign, more calculus, as India shifts from voice to negotiator. She consolidates power into silence, but every move is strategic. BRICS Plus pushes de-dollarization, redrawing financial lines. And the EU, fragmented in voice, but united by green ambitions. This isn't just a new political season, it's the next test of global power. In fact, told through narrative, tech, and control. It's about grasping the globe's next fault lines: trade, climate, democracy. 16 years, many key leaders, one disrupted world map. What comes next? Well, only time will tell. Nivedna Prabhu for ET Now.
Let's now put the spotlight on the primary markets then. In the past 6 months, 20 of 29 IPOs have delivered negative returns, with MobiKwik plunging as much as 60% from its highs. Many issues were richly priced, driven more by hype than fundamental value. Now, all eyes are on bigger IPOs expected in the second half of this calendar year. Sharad takes us through the trends shaping up in the IPO market.
The last 6 months has been very dismal for the primary markets, and out of the 29 IPOs we are tracking, 20 of them have been negative since their listing numbers. Now, MobiKwik sees the maximum loss beat the highest loss from the IPO price or the lifetime high prices. And interestingly, some concerns have also come, especially with the unlisted deals happening at elevated prices. And of course, the valuation correction happens, and post-listing, if the lock-in happens, the shares start breaking down. Highly priced IPOs, that's also something a matter of concern. And interestingly, over the last 6 to 8 months, the narratives have topped the fundamentals. Also, the market conditions, of course, you could say there's a lot of volatility in global cues, but nevertheless, the IPO market has not been that strength. Also, let's look at the last 6 months return. Now, how we have based it is the returns coming in since listing and the returns falling from the high. And of course, the losers are more here. One, MobiKwik, you see a large numbers coming in. Stallion India, Dam Capital, that's a surprise name. That's almost down 44% from its highs. Concord Enviro, Carraro India, 30 to 30 odd percent in both the segments. Also, Indofarm Equipment, Mamta Machinery and International Gemological Institute. These names have also given more misses in the last 6 months, and a significant wealth erosion has come for the investors who have invested in this company. The list for gainers is few, but there are only just 9 names. Skoda Tubes tops the chart, 43 odd percent. Quadrant Future, Quality Power ranging between 25 to 28% gains to return, and muted warm kind of returns coming for Hexaware, AG Swopac, which was recently listed, Ajax Engineering, and even Bellrise Industries. So there has been more misses than hits over the last 6 odd months. And 3 important things, takeaways, what's next going ahead. One should exercise cautious, especially in the unlisted space. The valuations are very high, and what would be the IPO price? That will be a cause of concern. Larger IPOs are slated to come in the second half of this calendar year. LG Electronics and also NSE, NSDL. So of course, liquidity will be something to watch out for, and be very, very, very careful in SME IPOs as well.
All right, thank you, Sharad, for getting us that IPO market trend. But with that, we're completely timed out on this edition of Market Fatafat. So don't go anywhere, as our closing trades is coming up next.